One of the things that I've found as an ADHD coach is people often seek out coaching for very similar reasons. But one of the reasons that always comes up is failure. So I want to talk a little bit about what failure and success are in this video. So if you're new here, my name's Chris. I'm a creator with ADHD, and I help fellow active brains learn the tools to finally focus, grow, and get shit done. So with ADHD specifically, we can have these ups and downs of inconsistency where we try something out, we try to work really hard at this new job, for example. And we're like, okay, this is the time I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to do really well. And then we give up. We check out and we say, okay, this job isn't right for me. I can't make it work. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, this career path. This is the way to do it. This is what I'm going to do. And we try and work really hard. And then we go, oh no, this is too difficult. And then we give up. And then we move on. And one of the traits of ADHD is that we can be consistently inconsistent. That's the phrase that can get bandied about quite a lot, is that we are consistently inconsistent. And that inconsistency is something that becomes embedded within us and within our identity, our self-identity. And as an ADHDer, because of the way that our brain works, we see that inconsistency and tie that to the idea that we are a failure. Inconsistency is failing. That becomes our definition of it. But one of the key things that I've learned in my time as an ADHD coach, but also as an ADHDer myself, is that consistency and success are not mutually exclusive, meaning they are not tied together. You can be successful without consistency. You can be a failure with consistency. They're two things that are not tied to each other. So the first thing that I want to introduce as a concept to fellow ADHDers out there is that if we strive to be consistent, then we're focusing our energy in the wrong direction. Because what happens is that we try to be consistent and then we fail at being consistent because of the way our brain works. And then because we fail at that, then we go, okay, I cannot do this. And if consistency is tied to success, then I will never be successful. And we get into this negative feedback loop where we constantly see things as failures because we try to be inconsistent and fail at that and go on this loop over and over, right? So the first point that I really want to drill home is that inconsistency does not necessarily mean failure. I have ADHD. I am inconsistent. There are many things in my life that I am inconsistent with. The difference is the way that I turn these into successes is that I don't use that inconsistency as a reason to stop doing what I'm doing. So one great example is eating healthily. You know, oftentimes people go on these diets where they're like, okay, I'm going to start this brand new diet and I'm going to do it every day and I'm going to be consistent with it. And then over time, as it becomes difficult, because it is challenging to completely change your diet, that falls into inconsistency and then they become demotivated, right? Because they're like, oh, well, you know, I failed today because I had a burger. And then that's seen as a failure. And then it demotivates you into continuing to try because you're like, well, I've already failed, so I may as well fail twice in a row and really go off at the deep end, right? And we tie that consistency to success. So when we fall into inconsistency, we can tie that to failure. And then when we think we've already failed, then it becomes a lot easier to give up. But the key thing is that success is not linked to consistency. Success is linked to persistence. Think back to the healthy eating example. Let's say you have a day where you fail to eat healthily. You have a burger. You have a choice of going, okay, I've not been consistent, but what is the thing that I need to do in order to change the next time, the next opportunity to eat healthily? Because as an ADHD, life happens, right? Things happen. We forget things. Things get left off the calendar. We miss appointments. So if we're looking for consistency, yeah, we will always fail. We will always live by other people's standards of consistency. However, if we live by the standards of persistence, which means that when we are inconsistent, we continue to strive and move forward despite that inconsistency, that is where the success comes from. Quitting is the thing that prevents us from reaching our goals. Quitting is the thing that prevents us from success. Every person that I've ever known that has had real success, their success is not based on consistency. Their success has always been based on moving past obstacles, continuing despite. So as ADHDers, We see failure as a lot more catastrophic than it actually is, something that is tied to us. And we start to see ourselves as the failure. And because of this, it leads us to avoid trying, avoiding continuing, avoiding persisting, because we think we are the failure. And the easiest way to avoid failure is to simply not try. So we give up. And because we try to live to these like neurotypical standards of consistency and traditional success, our mind goes into this all or nothing thinking where we think, okay, we have failed in consistency, so therefore we have failed at doing the thing, and therefore we are the failure. Everything becomes very black and white. So what do we do to get out of this consistency illusion? The first thing that we can do is to simply remember to get back on the wagon. In setting up my business, there have been many times where I have been inconsistent. But the fact is that life does happen. ADHD happens, and that can affect our plans and our goals. But if our focus is on how to be consistent rather than focusing on how to persist, then we're already looking in the wrong direction. So we need to shift our view over to how to persist, how to get through things, how to overcome the obstacles that come in our way. And once our focus becomes in that direction, then it's a lot easier to say to ourselves, okay, how do I do this? How do I persist through this? It becomes a question of how do I make this happen rather than should I make this happen? So it's really important to make sure that we practice that self-compassion, right? The more that we understand ourselves, the more that we become aware of who we are, how our brain works, the more that we can have that self-compassion, that empathy for why things happen. It becomes a lot easier to not have guilt and to not beat ourselves up. And when you stop beating yourself up for that inconsistency and start going, okay, how can I channel this energy into something practical? Then it becomes a lot more effective to be able to say, okay, how can I make this effective? How can I turn this failure into a success? What is the effective thing to do with this situation? You know, there is a lot of power in persisting over the challenges that come our way. There's a lot of power in persisting despite the fact that we have missed out on things that we should have done. If the focus is on consistently eating healthy, then it becomes very much win-lose. We either eat healthily or we don't eat healthily, and there's no in between. However, if you're persisting rather than looking at consistency, then eating healthily suddenly becomes a lot easier. It suddenly becomes a lot better. It's about shifting our focus onto what we can control. The thing that is in our control is whether we continue or not, whether we continue to move forward despite inconsistency. Then it starts to go to practical solutions. How can I do this? What steps can I do to achieve this? What systems can I introduce? How can I iterate on my process in order to make things more manageable and practical to get towards my goals? So ADHD can be frustrating. We can feel lost and like we're not living up to our potential. I get a lot of messages asking about how to build a better life with ADHD and accomplish goals and grow relationships and mastering our brain. And that's why I created the ADHD Blueprint, an ADHD coaching program with tools, strategies, and coaching from me. And it covers everything from focus to organization to communication to ADHD relationships to emotions. And when you join, you'll also be part of the community of fellow ambitious ADHDers. So don't just survive with ADHD. Start to live up to your potential and craft the thriving life that you deserve. Click the link in the description to join us and take the next step today. You know, that discomfort that we feel, that is where the growth happens. That is where the persistence should happen. So it's important to start feeling more comfortable in the discomfort, because that discomfort, that is where the growth happens. That is where the success happens, because that's the time when you're choosing to persist over simply giving up. So I just want to leave you with this. Inconsistency is not a roadblock to success. Inconsistency is not failure. Success can come in many, many different forms, but the only true driver to success is persistence. Because once you start to choose persistence, then you start to ask better questions. How can I do this? How can I get around this roadblock? How can I improve what I'm doing in order to get through? And that's where true growth happens. So don't fall for the myth of consistency. Don't fall for the neurotypical idea that you need to be consistent in order to get any sort of success in your life. If I can do it, if I can be inconsistent and still have success, then you can too. So don't fall for the illusion of consistency. It's a myth, it's a lie, and it's not going to help. In fact, it's actually going to lead to giving up. So we can start by asking ourselves the question, what can I do today despite the adversity that I'm facing? What can I do despite the inconsistency? What can I do despite the challenges that are in the way today? What can I do to overcome in order to achieve the goals that I want to achieve? If we ask ourselves those questions, then it becomes a lot easier to come up with practical, tangible steps that are effective in order to move forward towards the goals that we have. With that, guys, I will see you in the next video.